Well, if we're not quite there on cell phone usage, because we all do it, and we all, to one extent or another, think it's necessary in our jobs, and I do the same thing. If I'm going to court in Belfast, I'm on the phone to and from. What about texting? I mean, as the lieutenant was just pointing out, texting is, I don't know, the equivalent of probably a 1.5 in terms of blood alcohol content. It's very dangerous. I was reading anecdotally about a story about a concert violinist who can play Mozart's violin concerto by memory, but when asked to play and to at the same time read a children's book, couldn't do it because you can't concentrate on two things at once. So the stats are there. Texting is we don't have to be texting. Why don't we as a society outlaw at least texting, as some states have done? Why should Maine do that?
It's, from my point of view, when I'm riding up beside you and I see the phone out and I see people, you know, doing the head bob up and down, are they texting? Are they dialing? I mean, I can't ride beside them forever, but, you know, you see the head bobbing thing, and half the time they're looking at the phone, the other half they're looking ahead of them. We're getting different kinds of crashes now. We're getting people rear-ending other people at highway speeds at 65 and 70 because they're not looking ahead of them. They're looking behind them, they're texting.
I would say that
texting is, from my point of view, are they dialing or are they texting?
I would say if the trooper's next to you in the next lane and you're not sure he's there, you're distracted.
Well, very true there too. But
well, how about or a GPS? I mean, you see those all over there, and you're programming it or reprogramming it because you did miss the exit, even though she told you to take a right and you didn't. When you're doing that, aren't you classically distracted? And maybe that's really the better way of doing it. And certainly the idea behind the law in the first place is let's have a broader category here, because we can't say if you're using your GPS. If you know, by the time the legislature will finally pass the bill, there'll be 15 other forms of technology that we'll need to have included in the bill.
What do you think? Is this something that society, or us in Maine in particular, should just say you can't do? You can't text while you're driving?
I think texting is a major problem as far as teens go, because one, they can either be overconfident while texting and think they can do it whenever they want while they're driving. I mean, there are kids that sit at their school desk and look at the teacher the whole time, memorize the keypad. I can do it perfectly. But doing it while driving is, one, more dangerous, not for themselves, but for other people. And once you put other people's lives in danger, it's a little different than sitting at a school desk, not getting your history notes type of thing. Also, as far as texting goes, what's to say you can't take the time instead of texting to actually just call that person while you're driving? I mean, if you have to tell them something, you have to tell them something. So why not do it over a call that's something that's legal opposed to texting, which may be illegal and more dangerous? Yeah,
I just heard today the average teenager texts 50 times a day. You above the average or below the average?
I'm above the average.
Should we outlaw texting in Maine?
Yeah, I think absolutely we need to outlaw it. I think we need to get there. It's probably not going to happen overnight. It's becoming a considerable issue. I agree with you and the Secretary of State that we've addressed problems as they evolve, and this is a relatively new when we consider the last 10 years as far as the ability to text, but the number has grown significantly even in the last few years. At some point, I think we'll have to address some of the individual habits, such as texting, but we also have to have the broader-based laws that allow for the general distractions.
Matt, the legislative process this year considered a ban on texting, had many of these same statistics. It's an idea whose time apparently hasn't come. Why is that?
Well, I think it's hard for legislators to understand the consequences of actions they take. Obviously, any new law could be taken to court, struck. They're just as concerned about that as anyone else. I think they want to get at the actual problem. And the technology may someday allow for blackouts on cell phones while you're in motion, except for dialing an emergency number. Some of this may execute itself over time with the evolution of technology. I think the legislature is taking a very incremental approach to this and see how this works out, and then maybe take the next step. I think that should ban text messaging.
I got to confess, I've done it in my car, and I have gone over and hit the rumble strip, and I've seen cars approaching me. I haven't rear-ended them, but I've come close, and I said never again, and then I've done it again. So it's I plead guilty.
It's a double-edged sword for us guys who work the highway. Everybody's got a cell phone, but now people are calling in because other people are weaving on the cell phones. It just perpetuates itself. And we're getting a ton of complaints from cell phones.
Well, maybe the law isn't the only solution, Walter.
Right. It couldn't be. It could be. It could be. Gary Crocker has a unique view about this, as he always does, from Wes Gardner and how he sees distracted driving.
Wes Gardner, the last community in Maine to hold out on cell phones, now has them and texting. Gary, what do you think about this?
If there's one thing Mother just can't abide, it's distracted driving. Why, just the other day, we were headed up to Fuller's Market and nearly had a head-on collision with a town plow truck. We were smack dab in the middle of a nor'easter when Mother ran out of moxie, so we climbed into my Dodge truck, threw into four-wheel drive, and headed for the store. Apparently, the 2 cases of moxie I laid in last Tuesday want an adequate supply for my moxie-loving bride. Anyway, she was explaining the next 6 items on the honey-do list that she had prepared for me that morning. And she kept telling me to look at her when she was talking so that she'd know I understood what she was saying. Every time I looked away to make sure I was still on the snow-covered road, she'd yank my right arm right off the wheel and demand my full attention, which is when my cell phone went off and I made the mistake of grabbing for it. Well, Mother took real offense that I was going to answer my cell phone right in the middle of her soliloquy. And she yanked my arm so hard, the cell phone flew out of my hand, struck the windshield, and ended up under the seat. Well, this caused Mother to stop talking, momentarily, which allowed me to check the road and see that we were on a collision course with Gary Hickey's plow truck, with the wing down. He was flashing the lights and blowing the horn to alert me that a collision was imminent. Well, I can tell you this. Mother's been crystal clear that if I ever allow myself to be distracted from what she's saying just because I'm driving in a blizzard, there's going to be real trouble. So from now on, I'm going to listen to everything she has to say before we leave the dooryard. Oh, and I think the crease down the side of my truck from the wing plow on the town plow truck looks quite sporty. And that's the law.
Because the statute said that you can't watch television while you're driving. Well, there were a lot of discussion about that, but you know what the ultimate bill came up with? It's still allowed to watch the Gilmore Girls while you're driving, so long as you aren't distracted. So that actually wasn't changed in the end, and so maybe for the next legislative session.
Sorry, Trooper Marks. We'll see if the next legislature can do something about that. Hey, thanks for being here. Secretary of State Matt Dunlap, Trooper Tim Marks, Lieutenant Brian Scott, and from Coney High School, Jake LaChance. Thank you all for being here, and thank you all for watching It's the Law.